Thank you, by the way. Great. Oh, no, I'm good.
You can have that, and the mayor, he doesn't want to eat or eat it. You know, when I have them, I eat too. With my coffee in the morning, I always say I'm gonna have one, but I have to.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, by the way. Great. No, I'm good.
You can have that, and the mayor, he doesn't want to eat or eat it. You know, when I have them, I eat too. With my coffee in the morning, I always say I'm gonna have one, but I have to.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, by the way.
Too much time on the road, is that what you like?
You said it had them in the room.
Yeah, they had four actually squares.
Directional mics.
Yeah, omnidirectional. Lot cheaper than.
Actually, you ought to give them a call down there and ask them who their vendor is and. It is? Because it works good? What's expensive? 60 grand? Yeah.
My shoes are a little too big for me to walk around. They were fine, I tried them on. You know what they're on. Yeah.
All right, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board. It is now
You said it had them in the room.
it's not Thursday, is it? It's Tuesday. Tuesday, February 11th, and it is now 1:09 p.m. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Chairman Sean Poole.
Here.
Member Randy Stout. Here. Member Laurie Simpson. Let the record show that Member Laurie Simpson is absent for today's meeting. Member Michael Ferez.
Here.
Member Ronald McDonald.
Here.
City Attorney Nancy Meyer.
Here.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, is there any discussion or motion regarding the board minutes from our meeting back on 9/17. God, I can't believe we're just doing that. If not, I will entertain a motion if we have no comments or questions.
I move to accept the minutes.
All right, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Planning and Zoning
Nope,
Board. It is
that's the
now
wrong one.
That's right. It's not Thursday. It's Tuesday, February 11th, and it is now 1:09 You're right. p.m.
That was the
Please
last-
stand for the pledge.
September 17, 2020.
Have a second?
United States of America.
All in favor?
To the republic
Aye.
for which it stands,
Thank you very
one
much.
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Comments from today? Any?
Well, they're
Oh, sorry.
your public, so
We have any comments from the general public not regarding what we're discussing today?
there you go. You're good.
Okay, all good. What about the board? Anybody from the board? Or are we going to just jump into it? All right, let's just jump into it. Agenda today, we are Miss Nancy.
I am going to go right ahead and hand it over to Miss
Tammy?
Miss Tammy.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Tammy Verona, Verona Consulting, Safety Harbor, your on-call city planner. And today we're going to talk about the comprehensive plan update in response to the city's 2023 evaluation and appraisal report. Okay, and Sal's pulling up my slides here. My goodness gracious. And what I'm going to do is a little bit of a refresher. I came to you guys in December of 2023 and did a little bit of a primer on comprehensive planning. So I thought that maybe we just do a real quick go through like what a comprehensive plan is and the components and why we do it without spending too much time, because I know you have a lot of things you want to discuss relative to the proposals in front of you. So I'll just go ahead and get started. So,
You'll just give me one moment to Dana, just trying to do both sides, that's all.
oh, okay. Today we're going to talk about the comprehensive plan update in response to the city's 2023 evaluation and appraisal report. It sounds like pulling up my slides here. There we go. Let's see if it works. Oh yeah, I think you're gonna have to.
Yeah, you probably can't reach from here, so I'll just go ahead and start.
Okay, just go to the next one. So in the state of Florida, we have a Community Planning Act, which is in Chapter 163, Part 2 of Florida statutes. And in the Part 2 of that act, or in Part 2 of Chapter 163, it sets forth the requirements for comprehensive planning by all local governments in the state of Florida. Next, please. So the act outlines the requirements for local government comprehensive plans, how to make comprehensive plan amendments, the growth management requirements, and part of that, including the concurrency management system for your public facilities levels of service. It also calls for intergovernmental coordination mechanisms, and then engaging the public in decision making regarding growth and development in your community. Next, please. So the comprehensive plan is a written, adopted, long-range plan, usually a period of 10, although now it's 20 years. It establishes the shared vision of the desired future by the community. It sets forth goals, objectives, and policies for growth and development. It's intended to protect your valued places and promote economic prosperity in the community. And it's implemented through city regulations, city budgeting, and decision-making, so day-to-day decision-making, as well as periodic decision-making on plans and whatnot. The purpose of the comprehensive plan, I won't spend too much time on this, but it addresses housing and community development, sustainable development, environmental protection, public health and safety, land use management, adequate public infrastructure, economic development, and then again, community engagement. Next, please. The required elements of a comprehensive plan are listed on the slide.
my little arrows, I guess could you hit it one more time, Sal? Let's see what pops up. Oh. Okay, there you go. So this slide shows the required elements to the left: future land use, transportation, housing, conservation, coastal management, public facilities, recreation, open space, intergovernmental coordination, and capital improvements. There's also a public school facilities element, which is not required anymore. And then there's a possibility of optional elements. Some communities have an economic development element or a historic preservation element, so that's optional. Each one of these elements contains data and analysis that looks at existing conditions, projected conditions over the 20-year period when you're going to increase your population conceivably, and then from that to identify needs relative primarily to your public facilities and services, but also land management. And then also importantly, it includes adopted goals, objectives, and policies of the city. And included in that is your future land use map, which you're very familiar with, the future year transportation maps, and the 5-year schedule of capital improvements. And that is the schedule that indicates what you're doing relative to investments to resolve any level of service deficiencies. Next, please. So with the comprehensive plan, when you're doing a more robust overall, and this is something that you might get into later on down the road, is to look at the vision. Where are we now? Where are we going? What is our vision for the future? And how do we get there? So the comprehensive plan is about how do we get there. It's a starting point. So the role of the Planning and Zoning Board is in drafting the plan and any major plan amendments as a local planning agency in the statute, facilitating public input at your meetings, monitoring and evaluating the plan over time, and then importantly, implementing the plan. So looking at proposals and consistent with the comprehensive plan, and then using that information in your decision making, which is your recommendation to the City Council. So every 7 years, the state requires that the comprehensive plan be evaluated under a process called the Evaluation and Appraisal Review. In 2023, the city conducted its review, and it identified the following elements for having needed changes to maintain consistency with the state statutes. And we're going to go over those in a little bit. We went over those last time as well. So we'll go to the next one. So these actually have the element at the top and the proposed changes to the policies relative to what was identified in the evaluation and appraisal review. And I don't want to spend too much time on these because I did them last time and maybe you're more familiar with them than you were then. But this one just relates to naming US 19 as a facility on the state's strategic intermodal system. Next, please. The next one requires that there be a policy related to recreational traffic. Next, please. This one is changing the level of service standard for potable water facilities supply and infrastructure, which was 105 gallons per day per capita, but based on the new water supply facilities work plan that the city manager prepared, the city is comfortable with reducing that level of service standard down to 96 gallons per day per capita, which is a good thing. Next, please. The next one is just touching on the requirements of that 10-year water supply facilities work plan and corresponding the update of those plans with the Southwest Florida Water Management District regional water supply plans. So it's just kind of process related. And the next one is intergovernmental coordination, which required that dispute resolution processes not be voluntary, but they be mandatory. And the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council has a dispute resolution process. So in the event that local governments come to odds on a particular thing and they need to have some help sorting it asset there. Next, please. And then this kind of gets into that. So there's the procedure, there's the regional process for conflict resolution, and these just bring these policies up to date from your existing policies. Next is concurrent or capital improvements element. So in this particular, we just did a little refresh. There's no such thing as Rule 9J5, Florida Administrative Code anymore. So just a little bit of a housekeeping there. And the next one shows that level of service change from 105 gallons per day per capita to 96, as I mentioned before. And then the next one is, again, just kind of updating your concurrency management system policy to directly reference the section of the statute. Doesn't really change any. Oh, it does take out financial feasibility. There's no longer a requirement that a comprehensive plan be financially feasible. So pull that out. Does anybody have any questions about those before we jump into the meat of the matter?
What you just said, it doesn't have to be financial.
Your comprehensive plan used to be accounting. You know, it's like there's needs, and you need to identify how you're going to resolve the need, and then you need to be able to, within your 5-year schedule of capital projects, how you're going to resolve that. There's no longer a financial feasibility. The state's not. I mean, that's, you know, I guess it's what you guys are handling at your local level. The state's not saying you need to be financially feasible, but the state is saying that you need to maintain your level of service standards. Whatever you adopt, you need to be able to show that you are maintaining, you're not dropping below what you established as your level of service standards. For some reason, the legislature decided that they didn't want that financial feasibility clause in there, so they pulled it out. It's a long time ago this was done, not recently. Probably 2011, I'm thinking.
Right now,
No one was following it to begin with, so they just took it out because, you know, who was spending the kind of money that the comp plan said
So
they
there's
had to
also a
spend.
requirement in the statute that you update your schedule of capital improvements every year, and you submit it to the state. You go through a process. It's pretty streamlined, but you know, a lot of times it's not done. Some communities do it. Some want to do it, but they don't get around to it, and the other ones probably just don't even know that they're supposed to do it. So
for future planning, you don't have to show how you can pay for basically for something you're planning.
well, you need to. I mean, as the city leaders need to make sure that what they're expending has the budget to pay for it, and that they're maintaining their level of service standards. So yes, there's still a requirement there, but it's not coming down from on high. Okay, so the next is the conservation and coastal management element update. Next, please. So there were 5 goals, and each goal has, is this automatic? I wonder if it's going to be automatic now. Hopefully not. 5 goals, and each goal has a set of objectives, and then there's a set of policies. So I'm not going to go through each policy because there's a lot, and I'm hoping that you have had a chance to review and have some questions for me today or some input. But I'll go through the first. Oops, is it automatic?
No, I just did it.
Oh, okay. Can you go back to the? I'm sorry. Okay. So the first goal is regarding natural and cultural resources. It's required by state statute that the city have a strategy as to how it's going to conserve natural and cultural resources. The objectives related to this goal are ecosystem preservation, habitat protection, air quality, water conservation, energy conservation, cultural resources protection, and waterfront uses and public access. And these objectives, the subject matter comes directly from the statute. Next, please. The next goal is relative to coastal resiliency. And this was a big part of why we really dug into the coastal and conservation and coastal management element is because the city needed to have what's called the peril of flood policies. After, I think it was in 2023 that the vulnerability assessment and the adaptation plan were adopted, there was sufficient information to show that there was a need for these coastal resiliency policies. We use that data and also the recommendations from that adaptation plan in the policies that you see within the plan. Also, I want to point out that largely the policies that are in your packet have been sort of carried over and updated from your existing comprehensive plan. It's a new set. It would actually be a repeal of the old set and the replacement of the new, but there is a legacy of what you've had on the books already, as well as what was recommended during that vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan process. So in this particular goal, coastal resiliency, the objectives are risk assessment and mapping, so making sure that you're keeping up with the threats and the vulnerabilities of the community, because they're changing over time. To look at your public infrastructure vulnerabilities, your natural flood protection, because there's a lot that the natural environment does to help you withstand the forces of sea level rise and severe storms. Land planning and regulation, so that you keep development out of harm's way and lives out of harm's way. Building standards, so making sure that you're building to withstand those forces. And then finally, risk financing and insurance, such as your National Flood Insurance Program. Next, please. The third goal is emergency preparedness and evacuation. And the objectives under this are emergency preparedness and emergency evacuation. Next, please. The fourth goal is post-disaster redevelopment. So in this, under this goal, we have the objectives: the post-disaster recovery, so getting things back together as quickly as possible so people can carry on their lives. Post-disaster repair and development, so a little bit longer term. So, when you're going back to go in and rebuilding, replacing, are you doing that in a resilient manner? And then the post-disaster redevelopment plan. So, actually having a plan that goes through all the different check boxes of what you need to have in place to be able to rebuild in a more sustainable and resilient manner. And the last goal, thanks Sal for doing this, is community engagement and partnerships. Because it's very important, as you all know, that when the community is planning, when the community is responding, and when the community is rebuilding, that you have the energy and the input, the perspectives, the insights of all members of the community, and also your partners, because it's difficult to do everything on your own, and we really reach out to our partners and help our partners in times of need. And so with that, it's not really the end, but I'm going to go ahead and open up my version of my copy of the policy. And I would ask for any input that you have, any questions. If you see something that is missing, if you see something that you feel isn't important and you don't need it, this is your document, and so you want to keep it as responsive to, we did work with the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Committee over the last year, and we got some good input from that group. So, but this is your shot to make it your own.
I have a general question.
Okay.
Throughout the whole document, there's use of the words promote, and then we'll say encourage, and then it says support, and it says partner. So what are we committing to those different terms?
So when you say the city shall promote, because each policy at the top says the city shall, and there's a little clause that tells you how to use the document, is that those are things that you're going to be conscious of, or you're going to use that information for perhaps allocating dollars to a program down the road. So really this is the vision, the aspirations of the community. There's a few cases where it says the city shall do this. You shall maintain your level of service standards. You shall, use your future land use map to make land use decisions. But in a lot of cases, it's just a sort of a nudge in the right direction and to keep a placeholder for things the community would like to see. So, for instance, if the community would like to see living shorelines, instead of having the hardscape seawalls, maybe over time to replace those with living shorelines. So that might be an aspiration. And also when you have policies related to that, encourage, promote, support, you can also use that information to help you get grants. So for instance, you want to go to University of Florida and get a grant for having a team of people come in and design and install a living shoreline. This shows that there's a commitment that it's so important to the community that they've adopted into their comprehensive plan.
That's different from support.
It's just different words. I mean, you're supporting, you're encouraging. We could say support, but it's not it's just different words. We have a lot of words we can use. So
I'm just trying to make sure we're not committing ourselves to different things like
right.
turns into you shall.
Right. And I think what you brought up last month is that you were looking at what does this mean in terms of commitment for the community. And so if it turns out that something is onerous and you cannot do it, first of all, I don't think that anybody's going to come from the state to say, did you encourage those living shorelines? No, they're not going to do that. So it's really your internal document, your planting your seeds of what you would like to see happen within your community, to have your decision makers, such as yourself and your city council, be able to look at those things and say, this is what's important to this community. And maybe as a resident, you could come forward and say, this is in your comprehensive plan. I would really like us to do this, and I'm willing to help in some manner, organize, whatever.
If somebody's making an application for a permit and that maybe it says encourage the use of planting palm trees, just make
Yeah.
up. And the guys said, don't want to plant palm trees.
Right.
So plant palm trees.
So what they would say is typically, when I've been involved in these things, they'll say, where is that written in your code? Right? So then we'd say, well, there's really not written in the code. But he might say, or she might say, that I want to be a partner with this community in my development. And if the community says that they would like to have a palm tree, I can do a palm tree instead of another type of tree. So it's really a way of conveying what's important to your community. So not only your elected officials, your boards, your residents, but also the people who come in to do business. Hey, I want to be a partner and I want to be able to do, otherwise you have no information, right? You come in and you're doing what you do. But so no, you would not hold somebody over a barrel to.
And if I could add to that. So the first thing is kind of bring it to an item that you've been talking about in the past, and that's the seawall updates to the ordinances. If you have in your comprehensive plan that the city wants to look at alternatives to the hardscape, right? That's your opportunity in crafting that new language to try to incentivize the use of these other technologies that may further and advance what the comprehensive plan is. So that's like one way that this can work with you to develop new laws, right? You should, as you look at changing your codes, look back at your comprehensive plan and say, what was our goals? What was it we were trying to create? The second way is, again, something that you're going to be dealing with in the future. When a developer comes in and says, I want to do this PUD, that's an opportunity for you to look at your goals that you've adopted through the comprehensive plan. And, using your palm tree example, the city wants to see 10 times more palm trees. and the developer has, all oak trees, you can say, hey, we want to see more palm trees according to our comprehensive plan. So how about, we change some of these out. And so it's a way that you can help negotiate, with the developer to achieve the goals that you have. You have that you need more land conserved for natural uses. Well, what are you doing with this 5 acres here? Well, we're not going to do anything. How about we do a conservation easement so we can conserve this, which meets one of our goals related to improving our CRS points. That's something you can do, but if you didn't have it in your comprehensive plan, you may not think about it. So it's a way, it's a tool, I guess, for lack of a better word, for you to put together when you sit down with those developers to achieve things you may not be able to achieve otherwise.
It seems to me like it's there to level out the ups and downs of new boards. So say 2 years from now, this is a completely different board and they want to change, somebody comes in and wants to change it without this document. Someone comes in and says, I want to build such and such, and we don't have a vision. Then it's up to the people sitting here to decide if that's a good idea for Port Richey or not. Versus this has had so many people touch it that it's a large scale, the community is giving us a vision, and we're just trying to help adopt that so that as we move forward, when someone does come in and go, I want to build such and such somewhere, we can look back at this document and go, the community wanted fewer car washes and more palm trees, whatever the vision is that surrounds that thing. And that levels out this particular 4 people want to build something this way, and then the next 4 people want to build something this way. And then we end up with really like some of the places you've pointed out where we have some development when we didn't have guidance, and we've got a lot of different things going on in one neighborhood along one street because there wasn't a guidance document for that. This is kind of like giving us a lens with which to make sure that we're making decisions, and then we don't have to worry about people coming in and going, well, you just decided you wanted to do that. No, I really didn't. The city of Port Richey decided this 5 years ago, that this was kind of what we wanted to do. And that way we all as a group can sit down and go, hey, look, we're trying to do what was asked. We're trying to get to that. And the council can too. That way it's not, and also make sure that we don't end up us making a decision and then council wants to make a completely different decision. This gives us a way to all sit kind of on here's what our vision is. At least that's how I took it.
It's a starting point. It's something to build on. It's something to, as Matt said, to refer to. I heard, what is it? If you don't have a vision, any road will get you there. So it really is. It's a tool so that you can refer back to it. Say this is what was important to the community when this plan was developed. And
it's continuity. So it is. It's a vehicle for continuity is what it is. And we've utilized this multiple times, you and I in particular, for the last 20 years. Every time we do it, when there's something brought before us, such as the community that's on Washington Avenue, it had to meet the comprehensive plan and kind of make sure that it fell in line, and we built off of that accordingly, especially when it came to the table.
The parts where you got kind of the rubber hits the road are density and intensity. So dwelling units per acre, floor area ratio, your level of service standards for your public facilities, your future land use map where things are designated on the ground, and consistency, compatibility with your land uses. Those are the things that people who don't like a decision will grab onto and say, we would like to challenge this. But the other things that are kind of like the ideas the community would like to do this. Maybe they want to be more, have some wildlife areas for future generations to enjoy, or they want to make sure that they're doing things to help keep people safe after storms and from different types of threats. Those are certainly laudable things that a comp plan can help you. It's almost like it's the first step. You can go and say, oh, these are the ways that we can help us to be more resilient, or these are the ways that we can make sure that we can evacuate our community safely if we need to. But it's really high level. It's not land development code or those sorts of things, but
Right.
And I think if anything does seem like you come up against something that you don't want to adopt, you revisit this every 7 years or sooner. There's no limit to how many times you can update your comp plan, and you can just simply erase it. Go through a process and delete it.
Are you going to provide a glossary of terms? A good example is one of the big items you have there is affordable housing. Well, as soon as you say that, 90% of the people immediately think we're talking Section 8 and low-end housing, and not just housing that's affordable. For, like, we just had this discussion. I've got a developer that's interested in doing tiny home development, mostly for retirees and first-time home buyers, starter homes. The thing is that on our requirements right now, I believe a single-family residential home has to be on a 4,000 square foot lot.
With a minimum of 1,000 square feet.
Hmm?
And a minimum of 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, and if we bring in a tiny home developer and he's got really, nice 500 square foot units that have one bedroom, one bath, open area, we're kind of restricted as to what is considered affordable housing. Is that based and predicated on a number or on a average of what the community is? What is the definition of affordable housing? That's why on some of these things that we're talking about, we almost have to have a glossary so we know what it relates to.
So whenever you get into your housing element, that would be something that would be in the data and analysis or even in the policy to say, and there's typically some standards definitions for those things, but you can put your own definitions as for whatever, for certain things. But that certainly having established a baseline understanding of what these terms mean, if not in the overall world or in the community, is a good practice to do so.
Well, just like as you say, the submission to the state has to address a lot of different issues from intermodal travel to what housing is, and that seems to be a really vague definition to what are we talking about here. We've got to certainly comply with what our water system can handle if we're doing that, and what are we going to be doing on sewage lines to make sure that we can cope with what they say.
Great.
It was instrumental when we did the project on Washington Avenue. I don't know if Tammy remembers that, but they didn't have pitchforks and torches, but it was pretty close. And they were complaining that level of service didn't work. There was no way that we could handle that. We couldn't handle the water. We couldn't handle the ingress, egress, all those things. And we literally did. We referred back to the conference of this plan and said, listen, this falls in line. You can't fault the developer based off of what you believe when this is what our plan has always been. And accordingly, we adjusted it during the building process. And when they went through their PUD process, we added things, we added fencing and did things like that. That wasn't listed here, but it was a guide, and that's what we used it for. So yeah, the suggestions, there's a lot of suggestible clauses in there. They were key, and it calmed the actual.
It gives you something to measure against.
Correct.
When you have a standard.
And they were able to understand it at that point too. They didn't just think that somebody was just building something willy-nilly that didn't fit what they were trying to accomplish here, because they lived over there in Candlestick or whatever that place is called over there for the longest time. So it just kind of helps work through the minutia.
When this document guides the developers that are looking at our community to see if, when they're hunting for a piece of land to do something in, and they're looking up and down the coast, they're looking at these in each community to see where there's a vision that what they want to build fits, right? And then there also means that they're bringing, when they're showing up at the zoning board, or they're showing up at the building department, they're showing up with something that has already been designed to fit this, so that it should fit pretty easily with minimal adjustment, not just we want to build X and they don't have any guidance.
That
way we don't have to argue with them.
Not just that, in a perfect world, it's almost it should give a lure to the actual developer. Oh my God, this is the city that actually has the plan that we're trying to accomplish. This is what the vision we want. They seem like we're on the same path. I mean, we're dealing with a condo situation, very similar, right? So it's you have to, as long as the plans work together, and the more we can kind of narrow it down with Tammy's help, it helps us out.
There is a benefit when you have some predictability in your community for somebody who's
100%.
wanting to invest.
Yep.
And that they can see what's been established as far as policies and regulations, and that they feel that their investment is going to be protected over time.
So I could say these terms are vague enough not to set.
That's right. That's right. Support, encourage, promote. Yeah.
Do you want us to just pick up things as
Yeah,
questions out? We're going. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, whenever you have a question, we'll go through it. I'll make
This
notes.
is a wide question. The reducing the potable water to 105 degrees. Why would that? Why would they reduce it?
So you need to use your standard to help you project out to what your facility needs are, and you look at what actual demand is. So with a little bit of a buffer, because you don't want to develop your infrastructure to meet demand, because sometimes you have to go above that. There might be peak days or moments. So the city looked at its data and saw that it was actually using less per person per day, and so they felt comfortable bringing that standard down.
Does that apply to a permit applicant? Their density or whatever, how many homes or they can build?
So if someone came in and they said they wanted to build 100 homes, I would say, well, in those 100 homes, there's probably going to be 2.1 persons per home. And then I figure out, based on that standard, 96 gallons per day per capita, how much water is going to be consumed per day. And so then we can go to the utilities department to say, is there capacity? Can we allow this development to go forward?
Sounds like kind of automatically increase the allowable number of units. So it's just the water is the only variable.
Yeah, but it's kind of being fair as well. So you don't want to necessarily, you want to have enough to plan. You don't want to have it so bare bones that you're going to get to the end and you're not going to have enough supply or facilities. But that might, and Matt, you might want to say that 96 was adding in some buffer, because I think we're more in the 80s.
So yeah, right now we're rounding up. We're at 80. We're 79 gallons per person right now. And in fact, as we're starting the work on looking at the new water plant, they are right now talking about setting that at an amount less per day than what we're doing right now. Okay, so that's to say that we're probably well below what that 96 is, and will be for the foreseeable future. You could say that it was picking a number out of the air, which pretty much it is. But I looked at it and said, if we had a large development that required a lot of water for whatever reason, or if we had 2 large manufacturing firms come into the city, that number is going to change. So we need to have enough capacity within there that we don't cut ourselves short going forward. So we don't, get in this situation like Zephyr Hills where they wake up and, well, we can't bring any more development in because we have no more capacity. And so having the number a little bit higher kind of forces that discussion on capacity sooner in the dialogue rather than later. And so that's kind of the thought process why it's 96, because, I guess one way you could do is 105 plus 80 divided by 2, and that's what your number should be. But I think, you should be making that conversation happen of additional capacity long before you need to be talking about additional capacity.
So they've stopped all residential permits completely because they want to focus 100% on commercial. So if you're trying to build something new that's a commercial or manufacturing or industrial, we're going to wave at you, say, come on in. But if you want to put a new home in, even a new single family home, they won't give you a permit now. So is that a philosophy that the city itself needs to take up front? Say, our goal is to encourage us to become more industrialized, or do we have the ability to say, well, we prefer to keep ourselves more residential with less of that
Well,
industrial impact?
that's more outside the scope of what these amendments are. I mean, it's a good discussion to have, but not one germane to what is in front of you, right? Because those aren't the elements that we're
Well, you
addressing.
brought up Zephyr Hill, so I
Yeah, yeah, no. I understand. It's a great conversation. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be had in a number of our areas. I mean, I'll bring up an action you took a couple meetings ago with, rezoning a residential area to commercial. That conversation there is, do we need more residential or do we need more commercial? Should we be looking at areas that are residential today, but are good transitional areas where maybe it should be, commercial mixed use rather than strictly residential, right? That's a great conversation to have, and what it should be had, because I think what I see, and we use the term planning very loosely at times. Just converting a property from residential to commercial because someone asked for it isn't planning, right? You need to look at it and say, why are we making this decision? And these plans are difficult to do, they cost money to do, and there's a lot of engagement because you want to be able to say this is what the community wants, right? And when you make that change, my first question is, do we spend the same amount of time and effort on making that change as we did in creating what we're changing? And if the answer is no, to me, red flags, right? We need to look at that before we make those decisions. So this is a great discussion, one we definitely need to have, probably greater than just residential, commercial versus industrial. But we need to have that conversation. But unfortunately, that's not this particular topic. Unfortunately,
But it is a topic.
yeah, it definitely is.
Well, I met with the developer in charge of Zephyr Hills, and they were very clear that, we don't want any more residential. We only need industrial and commercial.
Industrial.
And
They're looking for jobs.
and
Yeah.
it's like, well, how are you going to feed those jobs if you don't have housing for the people that are supposed to work in them?
They have a lot of housing on the books. That's where the water issue came in. So there's a lot of housing. They're doing fine on housing.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
I got more.
Okay, keep going.
Moving into the wetlands
Okay,
and the definition of a Category 1 wetland.
okay,
And then item E, the last one, says wetlands of any size, if it has threatened or endangered species, would be considered a Category 1.
that's correct. And so that actually came from your adopted comprehensive plan. And I think that definition is used consistently even in Pasco County. So, but it would, if you did show that there was a threatened species or species of special concern in that area, you would need to look at that wetland a little harder. And that would also invoke some permitting with state and or federal agencies.
Is manatee a threatened?
I think so. I don't know, threatened or species of special concern. I believe so. But they probably wouldn't be in that wetland, would they?
They wouldn't be manatees if they were.
They would.
They wouldn't survive in most of our wetlands.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's coastal marsh. I don't know what, they'd only get it so far.
They're threatened, not endangered, but threatened.
Okay.
Or if they found some kind of plant, let's say, a square foot area, just one bush, okay, it would seems like it would stop everything.
Yeah. The one thing that you have going for you or you don't have going for you is that a lot of the natural flora and fauna that you had were probably not really in abundance in a very urbanized city. So, but there is the potential that some little orchid or something pops up. But I haven't heard of any of that happening in this region anyway. So
Yeah, I agree in this area, probably not a problem, but I think before I mentioned that was in Los Angeles during those
yes,
fires, and there's an article here about a particular shrub that was endangered or something, and so they stopped all brush control and fire control and everything, and that's one of the contributors.
you know,
to the
one
problem.
the scrub jay. I remember that was always a big thing with these developments of regional impact was, but they were tend to be more in the like the like the scrub areas like Beacon Woods East up there where it's kind of dry, xeric. But I think they might indicate some scrub jay in Port Richey, but is there actually an observance of it? I don't know. Like it was here probably at some point. Would they find it if they did a biological survey today? I don't think so. Probably not.
I remember hearing stories where there would be a eagle's nest on a property, and so all of a sudden the eagle nest and the eagle disappears, and so they went on with construction.
Gopher turtles.
So it can work the opposite way too.
The infamous gopher turtle. That's
Or
the
gopher
Turtles are a real bad one.
Yeah. Yeah. So if that whole line was eliminated, what would happen?
Wetlands of any size providing critical habitat. I think that, and this is not really like my strong area of expertise, but I believe that with a category 1 wetland, it's of a significant size that you'd have to do a biological survey. And if something was found, you'd have to contact the agencies and then they would. So I don't know that.
But it's saying any size. I guess that's why.
Because the 40 acres are larger. I don't know. I'd like to look into that one.
But that language though is consistent with like Swift Mud and DEP though, isn't it?
Let me. You're not making a decision today, right, on this?
No.
Because it needs to be a
This
hearing.
is
Okay. So can I look into that and then find out what the implications would be if we took it out?
Yeah, I'm curious about all this stuff.
Yeah.
So,
And my
and then
concern,
you brought up a question like if there's state laws or federal laws or something like that, let's say about an endangered species, no matter what we do or say here, or what code and laws and everything,
right?
They're going to come on down on us anyway.
I think if it is, founded within state law or I'm assuming state law maybe or something, something that when we submit this to them, they may have a careful eye to that, and especially I think Swift Mud would be the first one to kind of blow on that, the whistle on that, because I'm thinking we talked about this before, and I thought that language was kind of consistent with what they say in their wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be reviewed by them, obviously, when we send it in. So it may be something that they raise their hand and come back and say, you need to do that. I think the answer to your question, though, the bigger question I think you're asking, is we don't right now have an inventory of what those are within our community. And I think that's an area of improvement we need to make with this is we need to identify not only those environmental, biological, plants and fish and all this other stuff, but also from the standpoint of archaeological history as well, because those are the two things that usually catch developers off guard. Is they go through the review process and that used to be an Indian burial mound there, and then all of a sudden everything gets stopped. But if we do those things up front, we know, and we can help guide them so there's not that gotcha that they ultimately feel and kind of slow down or stop the development altogether. So I think there's a solution to the issue. If we have those surveys done, we know already where it's at. When the developer comes in, listen, we know those. What's the tortoise? Gopher. Yeah. We know that they're in that area. You're going to find it in your planning. You better start thinking about how you're going to deal with it. And the same thing with the wetlands. I mean, you know, we had developers coming in and looking at the Kryman property there off of Ritchie Road, right? And, you know, they have substantial wetlands on that. And they knew up front that they were going to have to deal with those wetlands. And we didn't even have to say anything to them. They've already started looking at that and what they have to do. But, you know, if there was something more there instead of just wetland, if it was the brush jay or whatever, scrub jay, you know, we'd be able to say, oh, by the way, we also know that that area has this particular bird. You need to be thinking about that as you come together. And in those pre-planning pieces, that's valuable to them because, you know, they can figure it out. But if it's at the last minute during, you know, them sitting in front of you and it's brought up that, you know, that, you know, whatever it is there, now all of a sudden they spend a lot of money and it just brings everything to a halt. So, I mean, there's ways, I think, to address that that we need to do regardless of whether that language is in there or not, because it will get caught somewhere.
And I think just to be thinking that if you did identify a rare, threatened, endangered species of special concern in your community, would you want to do something in a wetland?
No, I'm not saying I'm against endangered
Yeah.
species or anything. I'm just saying also it says any size, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
any size is any size, right?
Right. So
that kind
but
of
if
is
you
kind
had,
of scary.
so really the only thing is that you wouldn't necessarily be able to bulldoze that wetland, just fill it in, which you probably don't want to do as a low-lying flooding type of community. You want to have those sponges. As many sponges as you can have in your community, you need to hang on to those sponges. And so I think that if you had a scrub jay, you wouldn't be living in a wetland because they're like dry upland birds. But if you had that, you want to say, well, that's probably a good reason to protect that wetland. So you really have to think about what the impact is in this community, and you don't really have a lot of natural areas left. And you don't, as far as your wetlands, it's mostly like your coastal marshland, right? And those are large. Those are the big ones.
Right.
But I'll look into it further and have a better answer for you next time. What's next?
Randy's in a run. Go, Randy.
Keep going,
And
Randy.
a lot of check marks too. That means it's no problem. There's a lot of just clarification I'm looking for. Let's see. Navigable waterways.
What's the number of that one?
DCM 1.1.28.
Okay.
But basically dealing with dredging.
Seek federal, state, and county funding for the dredging and removal of sediment and debris from Miller's Bayou and all canals within the city to restore a minimum depth of 4 feet below mean sea level. That was in your adopted plan.
Okay, so that's something we've been doing anyways the last 20 years.
Correct.
We felt we didn't want to touch that one because it's I know working with the city since the 90s and how important that dredging was to the community. I didn't spend too much time on that one.
Keep seeking.
Oh, okay. How about boat traffic? DCM 1.1.
1.2.
1.1.
I see it.
Boat traffic.
Provide marine patrol to monitor and regulate boat traffic in order to protect wildlife, prevent shoreline erosion, and promote the sustainable use of marine and freshwater resources.
So is that a shall provide?
It shall be the policy of the city to provide, and this is from your comp plan already, to provide marine patrols to monitor and regulate. That's a legacy policy. Do you think that you do provide marine patrol, correct? Don't you have through your...
I've seen once every 6 months. Water.
I mean, if you're enforcing your wake, what do you call it?
No wake.
Limits, no wake zones, that's part of that.
I'm all for it.
Okay. And as Matt has said
But
before,
it doesn't say anything.
as long as you just do it one time or whatever, it doesn't
There's
say.
no stipulation about
The amount of
a
time.
having a nice boat, or
No.
a
There's
nice
no.
boat, or be patrolled
No.
24 hours. Or
We're not having a spec sheet here. It's just a general. What's
Just
important for the
division.
community? Keep those shorelines from eroding.
Okay, back to the biological survey,
Okay,
1.2.6.
got it.
Require a biological survey by qualified professional for all parcels over 5 acres.
That's also from your existing comp plan. So that's been in, and that's just case in point that Matt brought up. We had an applicant come in, had their property was 10 acres. Or,
It's almost 20.
oh, is it that big?
Yeah.
And they had already done their biological survey. It was just a matter of course, I think, when they're doing their due diligence. They don't want to be held up down the way. So
That's what some the landowner or developer they have to provide that.
We don't have that many parcels left either. Anyway, that qualifies that.
Yeah.
Half a dozen, maybe. I can think of 3 off the top of my head. 4.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
Off the bay.
after that, we have it. Well, city owns before.
Well, this is over 5.
Over.
Yeah. So you have Bay Boulevard.
There's
Yeah, there's
off the bay.
yeah. There's about a half a dozen, I think.
Okay. 1.2.
And those off the bay, we would want them to do that.
Absolutely.
That's what we're going to do. Issue.
1.2.
1.2.10 living shorelines.
Okay.
This is a promotion applicant.
Okay.
But some time ago, a few months back, we were discussing seawalls and all this kind of stuff. And one of the questions I had was about riprap, because the way that I understood it to read is it was saying riprap would be against code. That didn't make any sense to me. And in the same sentence almost, it says we're going to have environmental friendly waterways. And
So this is a
this contradicts what we were
this
talking
is just
about
promote
before.
because so we've learned from the last few years of storm events that the living shorelines have worked. So up in the Cedar Key area, they've really held their own. So there's a lot of evidence to support living shorelines. Are they appropriate in every location? Are they cost feasible in every location? I don't know that detail, but I think it's worth indicating that if the community moving towards a living shoreline solution, which is a green natural solution, is ideal. But it's got to work in the context. It has to work with the code. And I know you guys worked on those standards, so probably that's looking at what is allowed in the city as opposed to what the city might want to promote in the future.
And I think, again, this was maybe a definitional. What is the living shoreline? Is the living shoreline a bunch of rocks? Or is it a bunch of rocks with, green plants? Or I just lost the word I was looking for. Yeah, mangrove would definitely be that. And so I think that's where, living shoreline probably isn't just a bunch of rocks. There's more to it than that. And I think, a lot of issues I ran into in other communities I've been in where riprap was put down. One man's riprap is not another man's riprap, right? One man's riprap is, the sidewalk I broke up out in front of my house. And another is going out and getting a natural rock that's consistent with the area, that's going to be there and not wash away. And so it's going to be a definitional thing in how you, and that's again, we would have something in our comprehensive plan that is you advance, what are we going to do with these shorelines? We can then put in the actual development code. This is what we mean. And you define, that the way that you want to define it.
But remember, we never did finalize that, right?
Yeah, we can come back to that. It's on our
Okay.
list.
Because I see that as
April, right?
if this is in play here, then we would say, well, we can't prove that aspect of it because of this plan.
That's the beautiful word of that. That's like Tammy said. That's the beautiful thing with the word promote.
I think the issue would be if you say prohibit living shoreline
There's a problem.
code.
Correct.
But right now, it's an option. It's a solution. It has application somewhere perhaps in the city. But as long as you're saying that it doesn't conflict with a land development code, I think to have it in here is probably worthwhile since it is effective. It does create habitat. You know, it slows down the forces of waves, and it actually is.
I'm all for it.
Okay, good. Me too. That's why I'm advocating for it.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, just another question. The vehicle emissions 1.3.1
Okay.
was supporting question. Support the adoption of cleaner transportation options. How do we do that?
You know, that I know. I hear you. I suppose that, you know, supporting the adoption of cleaner transportation options could be installing electrical vehicle charging stations in your community. If this is something that's not important to the community, I know as somebody who drives an EV, I go to places and I spend my money, like Fitzgerald's downtown Newport Richey, because they have a charger out front. It is a way of promoting economic activity in your community. That's one aspect of it. But if you feel strongly that you don't want to do that, then I think that wouldn't hurt to take it out.
Well, we already did that. We allowed golf carts in the city. That's one of the ways, for instance.
That is a cleaner transportation
Correct.
option.
Yeah, which is why we did that. We utilized that for that.
But it just came across 19.
That's a different issue. Talk to Matt about that one later.
But if we were supporting cleaner transportation options, we would probably use that as a.
Well, you know what's a cleaner
As a
transportation option? Walking. So if you had a development such as what's potentially coming into Cody River Landing, it's going to be very connected and walkable. That provides for cleaner transportation options. People can walk out and get on a bus. So there's a lot of ways that you could look at this.
Add golf cart parking spaces, things like that. Absolutely. Yeah. Bike racks, all those things.
Even the walking path between
Correct.
Which is
our
again,
community and actually.
you have this in your comprehensive plan when they come forward to do the PUD. These are all the things you can say, hey, what are you doing to meet this goal?
Right.
Or for instance, with the development on the 20-acre site that's coming in, when we looked at that preliminary concept, we thought, hey, is there a way that you could create a little walkway to get over to the Walmart so people wouldn't necessarily have to get into their car, drive around the corner, that they could actually do a little cut through? Like, think about when you were kids, right? You'd always find those cut throughs. So we could, provide something like that to help people not use their car.
Or a bike path, or even a golf cart path, whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's just an enforcement question about outdoor water use. 1.4.4.
Okay.
Same page. Yep.
So develop and enforce water efficient landscaping standards for all new development and redevelopment projects within the city, including, drought tolerant vegetation, efficient irrigation, soil moisture sensors, mulching techniques. So one of the background behind this policy is that the Southwest Florida Water Management District has a program called Florida Water Star, and it actually is things that the developer can do kind of on their own, or you can put things in your code that require it to be done. But it is a way of bringing down that per capita water use, because most of our water, over 50% of your potable water that's really valuable and scarce these days in Florida, is used for irrigating plants. And so if we can do things to reduce that, it goes a long, long way. So I think what this says to develop and enforce, that's the next step. So within 1 year, the state would be looking at the city to be looking at code amendments that adopt that. Now, if the city decides that they don't want to do it, do they have to? No. But this is saying that this is something that is important at this moment, when the council gets into the details of it and it looks like it might not work out for the city, they don't have to adopt it just because it's in the comp plan.
So in order to enforce any of these things before, they have to have some kind of law or code.
Yeah, you can't enforce until you've got
Okay.
regulations.
So we won't be out there enforcing proper mulching, right?
No. This is for new development
Then you
and
need a definition
redevelopment.
of what's proper.
So for instance, when this developer comes in with theirs, we can say, hey, what are you doing on your site to reduce your outdoor irrigation demand? And they can say, well, we're doing this. And they're going to be doing it anyway because they don't necessarily want to be spending a bajillion dollars on water every year. And they want to be good stewards, I would think. So,
Oh, I guess it's a general question maybe for you guys. When we talk about new development, how does that go with people rebuilding their homes after the flood? You know, if they're over 50% damage, is that considered new development, or how does that work? Still not. Okay.
That's a rebuild. It's different.
So only something that's getting a new CO.
like a site plan.
Something that, yeah, I mean, when we're talking about new development here, we're talking about things that are probably greater than one or two houses going in, right? It's, you know, like the Crimean property, you know, it's 111 units potentially, or you know, in the waterfront, I can't remember what the latest number is, but a lot of units, right? It's not one going in somewhere.
So this would be helpful, for instance, on a new development, like you're talking about, Randy. For instance, a lot of HOAs have the antiquated, especially 90s HOAs, have the antiquated thing where they demand you had St. Augustine. Well, St. Augustine takes a lot of water to, especially when you set it up and everything else. We look for other ways to do that. So Bahia grass or other things to do that. But if you buy in certain HOAs, they're not good stewards of that because of that. So this is kind of designed to encourage the developers to look for better ways to do things.
So back to Zephyr Hills, because they did run up against, they had not enough water supply to meet their number of units that they'd already approved. So they adopted Florida Water Star. And one of the things is that if you're going to have St. Augustine, put it in the front yard where it's showy grass, but in the backyard, maybe use some Bahia or do something else. So it's really about techniques to reduce that. You can still have your green grass, you can have plants. It's just that to be a little smarter about your design.
And most of the homes in the Land Lakes area and out there, they did that. We put St. Augustine in front and they had grass in the back, but eventually all the Bahia grass died and now they have St. Augustine in the back.
Bahia grass died? Because
Okay.
St. Augustine's what dies.
Because they try to make it look nice. If you just leave it alone, it'll be okay.
Oh.
So trying to make it look nice, that's when it dies.
And again, I think, you know, your job in the development process, the comprehensive plan is what helps you make decisions and have that conversation with the developer when they come in with their plan. You know, you have effectively, say, a checklist, but, you know, if you follow it down and ask them, well, how are you addressing, you know, water conservation in your development? You know, they should be able to tell you. And if they can't tell you, you probably shouldn't be granting, you know, what they're asking for. They should be able to tell you. And again, most good developers are going to have the answer to that because they've thought through it. They know what they're doing, and the good developers are doing it because it's saving them money, right? From landscaping.
And it's not just saving them money, it's saving their ultimate buyer money.
Correct.
So they can say, hey, we're a Florida Water Star development. That's a reason to pay more for our house or whatever. So.
In Tampa, we had separate lines for reclaimed water that was used only for landscaping. And they made a lot of money off of us because every house was charged for that reclaimed water line. And you could not use potable water to water your grass.
Yeah, that's one thing. Yep.
You know, water, potable water is going to be in the next 10 to 15 years, Florida's #1 development issue.
Correct.
It's just, you know, what the cost is to provide clean water right now is astronomical, and everyone's running up against the same barriers that we're running up against, right? I mean, you know, for us to meet what the requirements are, it's an investment of $35 to $40 million. So that's on a system that's producing, you know, about 70 or 790,000, somewhere between 690 and 790,000 gallons a day. Just think of Tampa Bay Water, what they're providing, and they're up against the wall with theirs as well. So
And when you use less water per person, that expands the useful life or your capacity in your facilities, and then you don't necessarily have to go build the next one because sometimes you don't fill up the next one, right? But you still have to pay for it. So it's just more efficient. Efficiency is good in terms of water. Okay, what's next? You're doing great.
On the same theme, I guess, the energy conservation 1.5.
Okay.
We're gonna adopt policies to mitigate climate change.
Which one are you talking about? I'm looking.
Objective 1.5.
Oh, the objective.
Energy conservation.
So one of the things that your vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan says that this community is vulnerable to sea level rise caused by warming climate. So you want to make sure that, one of the things is if you're using less energy, you're also generating less greenhouse gases. You're cooling things down to where you don't necessarily have to run your air conditioner. There's a lot of different ways that being energy efficient or looking for energy efficiency measures is helpful in this regard. So, do you have a suggestion?
Don't take a shower, I guess.
well, I mean, again, trying to apply it to things that are going to be coming before you. One way to help create energy efficiency is less hardscape. Less concrete you have, less asphalt you have. There's a lot of studies out there that show those areas that are more green than with concrete or asphalt are going to, feel cooler than others, which requires less energy to be used to cool down areas. And so, as you look at, let's say, the waterfront development, if they come in and everything's concrete, that's probably not going to reduce their energy. But if they show and you require them to have more greenscape in there and, areas of water, things that are naturally cooling, you're meeting that goal of changing what the energy requirements are for those properties. Same thing, you look at Walmart. Walmart has an expansive parking lot, and now for life of me, I can't remember. Are there any trees in Walmart's parking lot? I mean, there has to be, right? There has to be.
At the edge.
But I'll tell you that same Walmart built in another place that I would never have a parking lot with that much asphalt. There would have been a lot more greenscape in there. But again, their requirements were a lot different than what our requirements are. So there's things that are going to come before you that you can ask those questions because you have that comprehensive plan sitting back there saying, hey, we really need to be looking at the things that we do to look at that, things that are affecting the climate, affecting the local climate. Because, granted, we're probably not going to be doing developments that are going to change the world's climate unless you get someone like billions of dollars that wants to create some machine to change
Technology.
Yeah, who knows? But it is going to affect our climate.
But what you can do are things to make your climate cooler. Your ambient temperature's cooler.
So right now, but we don't have these policies right now, right? So maybe there's some, but
So this is
a specific policy would have to be voted on by the city council, right?
right. That all these goals, objectives, and policies will need to be adopted or changed or whatever. But this is a body of
This is
policy.
some the building department themselves could just say, oh yeah, we're going to start doing this, right? It has to be
No, but they might say, well, energy efficiency is important in Port Richey. Let's do something relative to green building techniques. Let's give the information out to our builders, and maybe they want to have white roofs, or they want to have different kinds of air conditioning units, or whatever. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be a hard requirement like your building code. Actually, the international.
Well, I was going to say, there's already within the building code, there's already elements of this type of efficiency. But what you would be talking about is, okay, how do we achieve that? It's kind of like, what is the Energy Star Leads program, right? There's different, some communities have adopted the most stringent standards. And when you're building a building, this is what you're building in our community. But that would be something that ultimately city council would have to, amend the building code to allow for that to happen. It's not going to happen just because, we have a building official that decides that that's what we should be doing.
On the same subject, farther down on item C, it says promote the use of green roofs and living walls.
Okay, so a green roof is plant material on top of your roof. It says promote, doesn't say that you have to, but you could look at your regulations and say, is there anything that would prevent a green roof in the future? And a green wall, of course, would just be a wall that's planted with some type of, something that sustains plant life.
Earlier, a couple of pages back,
Okay.
talked about ITM, integrated pest management.
Okay.
Okay. A green roof would not apply to integrated pest management. Okay, so there's two conflicting things. That's
You couldn't use integrated pest management on a green roof? I guess it depends on how you define
there's
it.
things like mold, there's things like termites, things like that. We just love that situation. There's things like rats, there's things like fire ants.
Yeah.
All those things.
Well, I do know that they're successfully implemented in other parts of the country, so there must be some way around, there must be a building technology that allows you to support a green roof.
Well, that would be covered in the building code.
Maybe.
Like that would be covered in the building code. So you're not, the building code's not. We have a roofing standard that has specifics. Something that it's not just going to be somebody heaving like they did in the 70s, where you just put a ledger on it and throw dirt on top of it and plant everything. That wouldn't qualify for the building code.
There's currently state building codes that says you can't have plants within a certain distance of the structure. Okay, because of termites. That's in the code. So I'm just.
So maybe that could be valid because we have termites in our state. But this says in that same policy, mitigation strategies may include. So if there did come about where there was a technology that allowed green roofs to coexist with integrated pest management, then it's something that the city could look at as to whether or not their code allows or doesn't allow or promotes it.
Just a general caution. I'm concerned.
Yeah,
There's some of these things that maybe they promote and stuff like that, or maybe do this and that, but there may be a person nobody here, but down the road that they're going to run with it, and it's going to be contrary to what's the right thing to do.
Because maybe it's not appropriate in this particular microclimate of this with the termites. Okay, let me do some calling around to
I
the
would think
extension office.
if we had a house right now in or if this was passed just like it is, and we have a house in this city that's completely covered in vines where you can't even see the house, I would think that they may be some kind of code violation. I would guess. I would bet. You can't. You get in trouble for not mowing your grass and letting weeds grow. So there's just things can snowball sometimes.
Right, and I could see where in the code you would probably have a definition of what constitutes a green wall as opposed to just a wall that plants are going crazy on. But that's another good point. That's right.
Just paint it green. Would that help?
Okay, so IPM and green roofs.
Earth and structure.
Got it. This is great. I love these questions.
So, okay. 2.2.1 risk-based funding.
Okay. 2.2.1. Use vulnerability assessments to identify public infrastructure at risk from sea level rise to determine whether facilities should be built, rebuilt, modified, or relocated based on their exposure to flood risk. So what this, remember before, it was like the city's going to keep up with the data to understand what their vulnerability is, because you want to make sure that if you're putting money into public infrastructure, you're investing, you want to make sure that It's not, you're going to build it and then it's going to wash away or be inundated and broken. So it's just a matter of like, it may not be flooding in this location today, but it could be flooding in that location in 10 years.
I realize now it does say public infrastructure, so this would only be a city
That's right.
building.
That's right.
Okay, so I don't worry about that.
Looking out for your public dollars.
That's good.
Before you move off that topic, though, because that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. We have a lot of stuff in here that's, I know this is the vision, but I was just in a resiliency planning meeting with Treasure Island. So Treasure Island was trying to adopt a brand new policy standard that was Elevate TI. I don't know if you saw Elevate TI. They had some consultants come in and try to build out a resiliency standard. Their roads are underwater. This is kind of like Shore Acres. Their roads are underwater in an afternoon rainstorm. So they know that they have to do something to raise the roads in that area. But obviously you can't just raise roads without figuring out how you're going to move all the buildings. I'm dealing with the same thing on Key Biscayne. I spoke to Monroe County a couple of weeks ago and they asked if I could raise Key Biscayne. And I was like, raise what on Key Biscayne? And they're like, no, seriously, Key Biscayne. So I've been talking with a lot of communities, and I think it's something that we need to talk about as well as we move forward. And maybe this is the place, and maybe it's not. Is if we're in relative agreement that sea level rise is something we have to be concerned about, and that means we need to look at resiliency planning. Do we want something in here, not just from a public standpoint, that says that we're going to, we want to at least have something in the vision for as residential work is being done. You want to build those in such a way that either through stem wall on property so that the yards are already raised without flooding a neighbor, so that when the time comes that we have to raise the road, those their yards are already up. That was a big problem with Elevate TI, which is why Elevate TI didn't pass, is that when you're elevating a community and you're talking about raising the roads at some point, so they were setting a 2035, we're going to raise the roads 3 feet by, in the crown of the community in 2035. So how do we get all the houses that are being rebuilt up to a standard where we're not going to then force water into their yards?
But doesn't the code require that anyway? We have to be 18 inches over the crown of the road anyway.
But there's a hurdle. So 18 inches above the crown of the road with an enclosed parking space structure, as long as the pitch from the building to the property line doesn't force water to the neighbor. And that's always the hurdle. It's lowest man in the neighborhood dictates everything that you can do. So I can raise this one 6 inches without encroaching and forcing water, and then the one next to him I can go 6 inches, but you still have a pit, the lowest house in the neighborhood. And unfortunately, if the lowest house in the neighborhood is the first one to be elevated or torn down and rebuilt, you're still limiting with current code. So I don't know if this is the place to put it, is in this vision statement that we want to maybe promote a resiliency standard within the building code to allow for future development, future road elevations and right-of-way elevations, so that things that are starting to be built now that we can make. So this may allow us to make changes to the building code so that, the one I'm doing on a Waterside Drive, it's the lowest house in the entire neighborhood. Now, within the code right now, I can raise the grade of their inside garage space up, and I can pitch, as long as I don't raise raise the dirt on the sides more than, a 1/4 inch per foot grade from property line to house. But that doesn't, I can still only get so high before we're building a house that looks like this, and then their yard is down low and we're creating a pit next to them, hoping that eventually the neighbors on both sides raise, and then we can bring the yards up. And so, like I said, I don't know if this is this vision, we've got a lot of places in here where you've created that.
You could have like an explore sort of, look at this, to address that problem, whatever, And maybe you don't know what the solution is now or what the,
Right.
but at least it's something that says, this is a thing that we do need to look at because you're running into these situations in the community that if you could do something now, it might prevent a lot of expense down the road.
Right. I mean, so like what I proposed to Elevate TI was we were lifting all these houses. I told all the homeowners, like, let's lift them 3 feet higher because they hadn't adopted it yet. But it was they're a no fill town, so you can't bring any fill into their yards at all whatsoever. So they're trying to change that code, and they were trying to change it so they could get 3 feet of fill in. That way they'd be able to bring the roads up to 3 feet of fill. And I said, well, then let's raise the houses 3 feet higher than you would think you would on that lot, with the anticipation of still getting a 10-foot garage after you bring fill in. And let's not do driveways yet. Let's not do driveways. Let's not do parking pads under the houses yet. Let's raise them an additional 3 feet. Let's build the stairways, the bottom 3 feet of the stairs in concrete, even if you're doing wood for the rest of it, so that later when you can get a permit to bring fill dirt in, then you backfill around those stair plinths and around all of those columns. And then you can pour your parking structure underneath and you can pour your driveways. And you didn't spend any money now that you shouldn't have, but we designed this current build with resiliency in mind. But that means for a while, everybody's parking on rock and gravel under their houses and they all look like stilts for a while until you get there. But if this is something we've talked about as a council and we've talked about it a bunch of times, it's our job as a governing body to put things in place now with a vision of the future in play that maybe the community doesn't fully understand why we're taking these steps now. That I'd love to see something in this that says we want to adopt, we want to look at adopting building practices and policies with future resiliency in mind. Because public infrastructure is going to have to address sea level rise. At some point, Bay Boulevard is going to be underwater every high tide. Several places, there are several spots in it. As it is now, we get a little bit of southwest wind on a full moon, high tide, and every storm drain down channel and waterside and all of those, the ocean's coming into the road from the ocean because that's just the level the storm drains were set at.
What about this policy 2.4.2, multi-layered best practices code? Identify necessary modifications to the land development code that establishes comprehensive best practices for mitigating future flood events. These include, maybe it could be in here, increased setbacks from the floodplain, erosion control, stormwater management practices, standards for impervious surfaces. I don't know if there's like a nice little.
And maybe we just add it there that we want to.
But I think it needs to be.
We want to look
enough.
at building,
So
building code
maybe
practices.
what we do is just take a crack at that and see where it fits, and then we can bring it back to you next time. And if anybody sees something in another plan, like I don't know if Treasure Island has something in their comp plan, but I can look.
Yeah, that'd be great.
The problem Treasure Island doesn't have anything in their comp plan. That's why he's dealing with it now.
Well, and they squandered. Elevate TI didn't work because they went a little too heavy with a bunch of the pieces of it, and it was kind of all over the place. But there were a lot of good pieces in it.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be. I don't think we can probably find the
I
Elevate
remember
TI
meeting
plan.
with them when they were getting ready to do that.
And they are going to adopt pieces of it. They just could not adopt it as one giant plan. They are going to still open up fill dirt. They are still going to open up the ability to bring things in. But the proposed plan had all sorts of super crazy stem wall plans and stuff in it that we're going to make for some, this guy's house is down here and this guy's yard is 4 feet higher than this guy's yard with a stem wall between at the property line. And I think that just the pictures scared a lot of people. And nobody would.
Good news is you have time, right, to start looking at those things that we need to be doing.
Right.
The bad news is every day we don't do something is less time to have to get there, right?
Well, and I mean, I'm already, it's on my mind, right? So I'm already, every house that we develop as a contractor, I'm already looking at these resiliency, like, hey, they're going to raise your road one day. Let's push this thing up, with, as long as it doesn't exceed building height maximums, you climbing 2 more stairs to know that later on, if we have to put fill dirt in this yard or you need to put fill dirt in this yard, it's not the end of the world. we're not running down the driveway from the road when it rains. Now we're at least level with it. I built my house here in Port Richey, and when I did it, if you look at my driveways, all of the rake of the driveway is in the first 20 feet of the driveway. And then the driveways level out with what I figure probably ends up the next push of the road. All I have to do is demolish the first 20 feet of my driveway and regrade the yard up to the new road level, and my driveways are flat. There's nothing pushing to the house because it's probably going to happen in the lifespan of owning that house.
I think from the city's perspective, if you look at that block between Wilkins and Old Post on Bay Boulevard, we know that has to be built up. Now, exactly how high it has to be built up, we don't know.
Right.
And we're in the process of trying to get funding to do that preliminary study that tells us where is the crown of the road going to be.
Right.
And once we know where the crown of the road is going to be, then the next thing is we have to start figuring out every one of those houses.
Right.
And the reality is that unless all those houses are lifted,
right,
we're going to have a huge mess.
Yeah. And again, it's the running problem across the board. But if we don't adopt a standard now so that we can start putting them in place so that everything that does get demolished and rebuilt as we hit these, 45% rule, and things like that, everything that does have to be mitigated now gets mitigated to a standard that allows for that future development of the road. I mean, that's the comprehensive future land use plan, right? That's what we're trying to do now is map this out. But I think it's always going to get pushback because people are going to want to know why are you making me do this? Well, because 40 years from now, we're going to raise this road. Well, how could you know that? Well, we're taking a guess, but we're trying to do our best to make sure that we can get you where you need to be so that we're the P&Z. So when our kids are on this board,
That's right.
then they're not fighting this exact same problem of you've got one house left on that road that's got to go before we can raise the road. Because we can't raise the road until we don't flood that house.
Well, the other thing is, there's no real culvert planning program. And you take Limestone Drive, for example, it gets a lot of water. We're right over there. But there's not a culvert to speak of. And if we had a way to redirect some of that water, instead of having it just build up and cover over the roads, we'd be able to handle it a little better. The house at the very end that Bill owns, there's it started as a drainage into that big vacant property that's now part of the Audubon Preserve over there. But man, he's been flooded out 3 times because there's no way to get that much water out of there at that time. So it's not just the road height, it's dealing with the water that's coming off the other areas too.
Well, I think that's part of the thing that we need to be looking at in this plan too, is that there is grant money available not just for lifting houses but there's also an acquisition program, and there's grant money available to the city to acquire one dilapidated house in an area like that can become stormwater retention instead of becoming a house, so that we can have a place for the assumed water in an afternoon rainstorm event to gather while we have time to then have a single point source to pump it out into a spot. But the problem we're having now is that the vast majority of our drainage basins are below sea level when sea level reaches a full moon high tide. So those basins, I've watched the ditch across from Sean's house on Miller Bayou. You can see it come up through the weir and then run out across the ditch, and it's ocean water, and it hasn't rained yet today. And it's just because high tide is backing up through the stormwater system. So, I mean, it's, again, a comprehensive plan, right? It's so many pieces of it that have to be thought out. But this is our spot, I think, to be able to start putting some verbiage in that says it's on our mind.
Yeah.
This is what we want to do. This is the guidance that we want to do, because like you said, then we can go to grants. If it's in our comprehensive plan, and with something that we really want to do, then we can start doing some grant writing with appropriate verbiage that says this isn't just we're trying to get some money from somebody. This is the goal. The goal is to get, maybe we could get a stormwater grant to go in and drop culverts where they all need to be, because it's just a tremendous amount of water, but it's a tremendous amount of money. to figure out how to get that stuff to move everywhere it's got to go. And every piece of land that we let someone develop that's undeveloped land now probably is the spot that neighborhood's water is going or was going before we let them fill it in. So yeah, I mean, I would love to see some verbiage that just says that
we'll look
the
into it.
goal is to change our building practices with a future resiliency in mind.
Mike, just
When you say ocean, do you mean the Gulf of America?
Yeah, that.
just to let you know, last week we submitted to FDEM mitigation grant for stormwater management plan. So
Cool.
hopefully that we'll get funding on that, and we can start moving towards those things.
Yeah, there's a lot of programs coming up right now that's on everybody's mind. You know, and I know there was talk of some grants changing, but there is a lot of money within the state that's not federal, through FDEM and through Elevate Florida and a couple of other programs that are programs that we can get some money for the community on, not just specific individual homeowners, but some larger scale infrastructure funding. And I know that money's been accessed by several communities. The entire HMGP grant that was written last year for Hillsborough County had not a single residence in it. That entire grant that they wrote for Hillsborough County was specifically for fixing traffic lights that were destroyed in the storm and things like that. So those grant programs are available at the county and the city municipal level. We just have to leverage them if we can. And I think this is a good place for us to put the verbiage in that says this is why we want the money, because we have a comprehensive plan for not having this be problematic in the future.
Definitely forward thinking. So good.
All right, I interrupted your train.
You did good.
What's next?
Let's see, where am I?
We're on a roll.
Okay. I thought you said China here for a second. But
China.
CHHA.
Oh, the coastal
That's what I
high
got
hazard
last-
area.
Avoid public expenditures for new street sewer, water extensions, or expansions within the coastal high hazard area that could encourage higher densities in areas vulnerable to major storm events.
So that's a carryover from your adopted plan. So it's on the books today. But
Does that conflict with what we're talking about for the waterfront district?
so avoid public infrastructure. So new street sewer, water line extensions or expansions. I guess
Depends on what the definition of new is, right? Because
yeah,
most down there is replacement.
or vulnerable to major storm events if they use technologies to lessen their vulnerability. I guess that's the way.
I guess to me that would be more of looking at the development on Limit Drive. That's new development where we don't have a lot of infrastructure there to begin with, and I don't think the intent is to stop development, but to challenge the development to make sure that these things are being done in a way that's not going to result in a loss of. If they don't do appropriate amount of fill where they're going to be building, we know probably within 30 to 50 years there's going to be a lot of water around, right? So we're going to be kind of in the same situation we have with all the at-grade houses, and potentially in 100 years plus, they'll be uninhabitable in areas if they don't build above that flood zone area. So if they come in saying this is what we're doing, and we know 100 years, or we believe within 100 years it's going to be underwater, we shouldn't, extend any infrastructure. Why would we do that, right? But if they come in with a plan that they can tell us that based upon the projections that the city has paid a lot of money to get, this meets that vulnerability analysis you did in the adaptation plan, because when the water comes up, it's not going to get here, so it's not a lost investment. It's going to be investment that's going to be there.
And I think in this, it's avoid public expenditures. So I think it's where you don't necessarily want to have your your public dollars going into a place where it's going to encourage, but if somebody's developing their own infrastructure. But I think that it has to be looked at, just avoid, not like restrict.
Right. So this wouldn't open us up to, I think, all of us here and the whole council, I think the whole city is supportive of the waterfront district development. And I just hope it doesn't open us up to somebody for litigation or something. If somebody says, "Oh, it says in your plan."
Let's maybe look at that one just so see if there's something we can do just so it's clear.
Do we have do we have a map that defines where the coastal high hazard area is?
It's like 75% of your city.
Okay.
So it's like only the area out over by Congress.
Right.
And,
The furthest from the edge.
and north, where the industrial areas are.
Where we're at right now.
Where it's dry.
Yeah, right here.
That's not a high
Here, yeah. Okay, so CCM 2.25. I'll look into that. See if that might. Okay, what is next?
Just another question. Velocity, that's velocity zones where you're thinking of. I think velocity zones are out there at the point.
I'm
High
going by
hazard
too,
areas are different.
unfortunately.
Or,
I know I own a
Are you
couple
in
of houses on there.
Velocity Zone?
2 of them.
No, you're not. You're just ocean side of the Limwa.
And that is carryover policy from your existing comp plan, so all that detail was in there,
so
or is in there.
Okay.
Is.
Is a recreational vehicle park, would that include storage of RVs?
I think the VE zone is right on the forefront of where the impact
yeah.
comes in.
But that doesn't include RV storage.
No, you're talking about specifically out there at the end of the thing. I don't think so. I mean, this is you're not putting. You don't want to put something in that's high risk of loss of dwelling. Is kind of what this is designed for, is to keep people from building things that are, like you shouldn't put trailer parks in Tornado Alley.
They're vulnerable.
We just
housing
shouldn't put them
types,
up. They're
so you should
magnets.
protect them in better locations, and you don't want to necessarily have vulnerable populations who can't evacuate easily, and then of course you don't want to have poisons and
Really,
chemicals.
you're thinking long-term resident, not short-term kind of rental or transit, right?
Right.
And so, the RV park RV storage or boat storage, you're not going to have that residential component, and that's what I believe that's what it's trying to get away from. So we don't have to go in there and rescue people because they didn't want to leave, or even try to evacuate. And I think that's a lot of different issues within this also help us address that evacuation piece that as we submitted the amendments to the comp plan for the development, this was one of the areas that the state kind of said you need to compare this development to what your requirements are as it relates to evacuation. And so as you start allowing developments to occur in those areas, you need to be able to address how do we get people out, how do we get people safe during different events.
Okay, 2.5.3 flood zones A and E. So that's probably where the waterfront is. Anyways.
That's the floodplain, 100-year floodplain.
Yeah. Says any construction within the 100-year floodplain must conform to flood-resistant construction standards and floodplain management requirements.
Which one is this? 2.553?
2.53.
Any construction within the 100-year floodplain must meet or exceed all applicable building codes, flood-resistant construction standards. So anything that's on the books today that you have, it's just saying that you probably could do away with it, but it's good to be a reminder that in that area you have to follow all the rules.
Yeah, so any development that occurs now. So if
it doesn't say that though, it says any construction. That's the only thing I'm asking about.
Oh, the any construction?
Right, but it's
Yeah,
again,
you would have
wait,
to.
Like all the people rebuilding their homes now, all of a sudden they have to comply
Yeah.
to flood-resistant construction standards.
that's the law.
But that's the law.
That's
They do
already
have
the law.
to, as you put stuff back, you have to put it back to current standard. Anything that you touch, you don't have to put it back. You can't put it back. Like if you're putting drywall up and the house was in 1951 and the regulation in 1951 was that you could put it up on non-PT, you can't do that now.
Right.
So
If
anything,
you're less than the
Yeah, I understand
threshold.
that.
So
I'm mainly concerned about the flood,
yeah, so right
flood
now,
stuff.
if you have an ag grade, house, and you're repairing it back to its original state, that's not going to be construction as that, that's being used. If you tear your house down and you're starting over, now you have to build it up to whatever the new standards are.
So raising the structure, then you have to raise the current structure.
Yeah.
no. If I'm raising the structure, then only the parts I touch do I have to adjust because
Correct.
it's not in excess of the 50%.
As soon as you're raising it up,
It's out
you're
of
out of the flood zone, so that doesn't apply.
Well, you be careful saying that because
Yeah,
the number of people who say, "So I don't need flood insurance,"
Yeah.
you're still located in a flood zone.
Yeah.
You're just above it. I think what this does is it allows us to have. It just says that you have to meet or exceed all applicable building codes, and then that allows the building code to be the thing that dictates.
Well, can we make it just say that then?
It says applicable.
The flood resistant makes it sound like you got to raise your house to me.
It's meet or exceed all applicable. So if there is a standard, but it's not applicable to your situation, then you're covered.
And that's guided by the 50% rule and all of our other building codes. So this just says that we're in our plan, we're going to make sure that people that our code still continues to follow the current the assumed standards. And those standards are going to change. I mean, if FEMA makes a guideline change that says no one can rebuild anything below the base flood elevation ever again, it's now 10% or something like that. Then the city has to make a decision as to whether or not they want to follow that guideline to stay part of the NFIP, and which they more than likely will. And then at that point, nothing gets rebuilt. This just says that part of our comprehensive plan is that we're going to follow the accepted industry standards and building codes.
And this also shows to the state that the city has a strategy by which to address its need. And this is just one of the pieces of the strategy. It is from your existing code. I'm pretty sure that's, but I think that what covers what you're concerned about is it would be if there was a building code or other standard that was applicable to that particular situation. And if they were sub-threshold and they didn't have to do certain things, then they would be.
Okay. 3.2.5 overnight accommodations.
Okay.
Would this include Airbnbs? Just curious.
Require that new or redeveloped overnight accommodation facilities submit a city-approved hurricane evacuation plan for all guests, ensuring safe and efficient evacuation during emergencies. Yes, if you had, if you're going to do like an RV development.
He said Airbnb.
Airbnb.
Oh, Airbnb.
Yeah.
Short-term rentals.
I would think that standard would still apply.
New or redeveloped overnight accommodation facilities. I think the overnight accommodation, we probably would need to define that. But if you're Airbnb, does Airbnb require them to come forward and get something from you?
Not currently.
Not
There's no trigger.
Yeah, I mean that's I think the difficulty in that is I don't think that language, because is that new language? I didn't think that was new language.
I mean, I didn't add it recently.
Yeah, no, I thought that's been in there. So I think considering that this language was put in the plan probably well before any Airbnbs were conceived of, I would like to say that is talking about, again, new or redeveloped. So that's hotels, that's RV parks, that's anything that's going to be
Transient.
resident or transit residential.
Well, they're pretty transient.
And
Actually, I think I get what they're trying to accomplish. I think it's a good idea, but especially an Airbnb, a lot of times the owner is not even there.
Yeah.
Okay, and they could be from Ohio or who knows where, and they're there and have no clue about a hurricane or anything like
Well,
that.
that's an important thing, right?
But
I think his point's well taken. I mean, it is something that I would never have thought of with this. I mean, again, I don't think that contemplates that, but I think that is something that needs to be addressed. And as we move forward with that, whatever ultimately we're going to do with the Airbnbs and the short-term rentals, we can work that in there. But
Are you going to start licensing those?
Yeah.
Because I know that we originally talked about having the fire marshal go through and make sure that there was a fire extinguisher and carbon monoxide thing.
And I don't think it's outside the scope to put standard for the city to put a standard in that says that if you're operating a short-term rental, here's a few things that you need to have, and
Just
things.
so everyone knows, the state has preempted short-term rentals, so there's a very specific things the city can and can't do. And I don't have it up in front of me. There's a lot. I mean, you can have application and a contact for 24 hours a day, that kind of thing. I think inspections are still obviously are allowed, but there is limitations on what we can do. But we can
Maybe
still
that's
do a little
the
bit.
answer there.
Yeah.
I need that list.
I think this is
I
anticipating
would be
more like
happy.
hotels,
I would forward
any
them.
sort of large.
yeah, I think that's the intent behind it. Is if you have 100 or 100 plus people there, how are you getting them out there?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what that's aimed at.
But maybe we need something in here in a different section even that talks about, that we intend to have a plan to address short-term rentals and the vulnerability of out-of-town guests not aware of our evacuation plans, our requirements and standards.
Well, that should be that's just short-term rentals. As somebody who
Yeah.
rentals too,
Yep.
I had tenants that stayed during the storm. When we told them, we sent messages out, please leave. It's not worth staying. And we had a tenant that literally was calling her son saying, I'm standing on the counters. I don't have to tell you. We told you to leave. So, but I agree 100%. It needs to, this is the coastal community and we have to deal with it. Last year was a wake-up call for many of us. I will never stay in my house again. I don't care if Mike Grace is at 25 feet in the air. I will never stay again during a storm. I just won't do it. There's no sense in it.
My house is a bunker, and I can tell you, we always said that if it was category 2 or higher, coming straight for here, we'd leave. But anything less than that, we'd stay. The house is fine. And after being here while Milton was south of us, and just having 80-mile-an-hour wind in the back of the house for that period of time, I don't know that a category 1 that's going to make a direct hit, I don't think I would put my family at the risk, because there's so many things that can go wrong so rapidly in that house that I can swim with the dog or paddleboard across the bayou with the dog to get out, but I'm not going to do it with three small children and a wife. That's a divorce.
It was just, unfortunately, I know this is deviating a little bit, but unfortunately, during those events, there's so many different things that happen because of the force. I mean, again, how many fires occur because, and if you have more than 39 miles an hour, our trucks aren't going out.
Right. Well, we shouldn't be asking them to. You're going to put firefighters, to come out because you weren't willing to leave.
That's why evacuation is important, because it's not just the rising of the water, it's not just the wind, it's the things that happen because of those two things. That again, the water itself may not get to your house, but with the right amount of wind and next door being a little bit lower, and it catches on fire and the wind blows it over to your house. I don't care how high your house is.
Yeah.
It's
so many things that can go
Neighbor
wrong.
left his Tesla in the garage.
So we can look at that one and see if there's anything, maybe the Airbnb preemption is going to cover us, but we can see if there's any tweaks we can make it a little clearer.
Okay, that go under our evacuation.
Or fast forward
Where are
to
we? I don't even know.
4.2.
We're under evacuation.
Are we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, go ahead. We're on number 4.
Fast forward 4.2.1. Building moratorium.
So that's an option that the city, says after a major disaster, the city shall adopt a temporary post-disaster building moratorium to allow sufficient time for damage assessments, explore redevelopment opportunities, implementing hazard mitigation policies, and evaluating risk levels and formulating mitigation strategies. I don't know, did you do some sort of
We did.
action?
We sort of did. Yeah. We said, you said pad out. We had a whole group that came out there and really walked the streets to find.
Yeah, we tried to slow it down a little bit so we could get
Is
a handle on what's going on.
is the word moratorium too?
I think it is. I mean, I think to me it's a different connotation when we use moratorium. Yeah, I think there
Right.
maybe it's a different word for that. I don't know what it would be, but
It goes on to talk about expedited permitting, and I got a permit the very next day. When, well, I was impressed, and you had a special permit for the hurricane and everything.
Okay, let's look at that one.
That kind of conflicts with that. But,
well, it's actually
we wrote this before the.
Yeah, we did. That actually, some of that expedited permitting is actually founded in state statute, because under emergency conditions, whenever the governor declares an emergency, we have to actually allow certain types of permits to go forward faster, like a roof permit is probably the best example. You know, we can't say, oh, you can't do it. Sorry, it's going to take 2 weeks. You know, we have to do everything we can to get that permit done so you can secure your house. So there are, you know, there's some HVAC ones, electricity, those type of things. But as that's being said, you know, what more the county ran into than us, you know, people wanted to restore their electricity very quickly. And in some of those areas, they shouldn't have restored their electricity because they hadn't made those improvements. They haven't done the repairs that need to be done, and it caused issues. And so I think that goes back to why you do need to slow some of the that work down is because people are in such a hurry to get something done. They're not spending the time and effort to think about what it is they need to get done. And so, you know, we don't want to kick people out of their houses, but we also, I think, have an obligation to make sure they do it properly so it doesn't harm them later on.
right. We just say the city will encourage and promote, support the permitting process in an efficient and safe manner, or something like that.
Yeah,
Instead of saying a
we'll look
moratorium.
at how we, or maybe it's just a different word than.
But we have that in the
moratorium.
expedited permitting down below it.
Yeah, right. It says all that. That's
Yeah,
I'm
so,
wondering
yeah, I think
why we want to say moratorium.
Yeah, let's just look at that. I mean, I think it is a typical response when you're just trying to regroup and figure out
Right.
what before you start making mistakes. So I think that, but moratorium, obviously you got by without a moratorium.
Yeah.
You were able to.
Well, this storm is probably the first time we've actually done official damage assessments either as well. Even 93, they didn't do damage assessments.
They did not?
So no, the county, the
They probably
city
didn't have that.
So no, the city was underwater itself.
I know. Chasco Fiesta Parade was canceled. What's the next one?
Okay. 4.2.5 severely damaged structures.
Oh, that one needs to be changed to 49%, correct?
50.
Oh, 50. It didn't change at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look
It was
at that.
going to change, but it didn't.
Okay, so that one will go back to 50%, which is actually in your plan today. Thank you. 4.2.5. I know that was brought up last meeting too, but I haven't touched anything.
Adaptation 4.2.7, reducing permissible development density. That's the same question I had. Does that apply to the waterfront district?
For areas experiencing major or moderate damage from storm surge, evaluate and consider the following adaptation strategies. So these are from your adaptation plan. Relocation, reducing development density, reconstruction, according to more stringent standards, and public acquisition. I think those are pretty standard adaptation solutions,
Right.
but I think it's just to consider.
Well, so that would mean the city would reconsider the waterfront district density.
Well, I mean, if there was a compelling reason to do that after.
Well, it says it right here.
No, it says that for areas experiencing it, evaluate and consider the following. So you would look through this we just had a major event. We had a lot of damage. What do we do in the future to not have such devastation, expensive, whatever? So could some of those properties be purchased and developed or relocated elsewhere? Could you look at when you develop new, you're going to reduce? So, I mean, these are all the options that are available to you. These are accepted adaptation strategies.
Yeah, and I think, to answer your question directly, C is probably the most likely thing that you're looking at what can you do, since we know what the possibility is there now. What can you do to avoid that? And the answer is you're going to be building up, right? You have to build up above the current flood elevation, plus potentially 2 or 3, whatever the new number is going to be. Constructed in a way to make sure that your roads are maybe even built above that so they can get out to 19. So, I think there's construction means that are going to alleviate those things that we saw there. But the reality is, unless the state builds US 19 up, they're going to be impacted by that again, no matter what they do. But they can at least build it in a way that's going to protect the people that live there.
On number 4.2.6, it says it's pretty broad. It's anything that's been having reoccurring significant damage due to storm surge is going to be designated as coastal wetlands and future land use to prevent future redevelopment. Does that mean we're going to just eliminate those houses and leave them as vacant lots?
So if there's a public acquisition of a repetitive loss property, then it's public now. So then you're going to take it out of the development categories and you're going to put it into something that's not allowing development, which would be your wetlands and your coastal lands wetlands category.
Does that mean you can't redevelop that property once it's in that position? Because even if you elevate it and build up?
Well, if the public purchased it, it's no longer. So.
Well, I think a good example is on Miller's Bayou,
5219 Miller Bayou.
5219, yes. So that property was acquired through FEMA. I can't remember which program it was, but one of the programs, and it no longer can be developed. So the city's going to own it. We're going to make it into a park area. But that's what that's really referring to, is not necessarily the houses as they are today, but once they have that repetitive loss, if they go through that FEMA process, FDM process for acquisition, we would then make them non-developed. But outside of that, we could as a city start looking at those areas and say, geez, this area is just constantly, there's a lot of damage going on.
It's chronic. It's chronic.
Yeah, we know it. The house values are going down because of not the investment. They can't put it in. We go out there and we acquire it, and we create again. I don't know if it'd be wetland necessarily, but it would be non-developable in the future. I think there's areas right now in the city that we kind of see where that's probably going to happen. I can think of one right now where it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, Candlelight's a classic example.
Yeah.
Because even during a bad rainstorm back there, they get wet. And most of those homes, unfortunately, they don't have the wherewithal to fix them.
Yep.
And they live in these properties that are becoming more blighted by the day. And the values are awful. So they just need to be purchased with that program, purchased and turned into green space. Right. So just like you did on the one in Miller Bayou, that's a wonderful spot now.
Well, the one on Miller Bayou was purchased through the regular acquisition program. It's a different bucket of money.
Right.
So when you allocate something as available like this, when we have this in our plan and there's a piece of property deemed that's the best use for it, that it really shouldn't ever be anything else, because we need at least one house in this neighborhood to funnel all the storm water through to get to the canal behind it. Like, that's the only way to get the water out of that neighborhood. Then it opens up an entirely different bucket of money that was set aside by Congress a few years back, specifically for this purpose, which is to purchase land that should not be further developed, because we simply don't have either one, the community needs it for this use, that's non-residential, non-commercial. It's got to be used for public lands, or there isn't a building practice available that allows you to build something there that's not vulnerable. And it actually came about because of the keys. They actually purchased Big Pine Key. They bought every single house on Big Pine Key using this federal grant that was set aside very specifically for this purpose, and turned it into a state park. And it'll never be developed again because that particular key was just a sandbar. And no matter what you did out there for construction methods, you simply couldn't put enough concrete in the ground and go deep enough to get to anything that would keep them from washing away when we had a bad storm. And so Congress someone levied Congress and got them to put together this extra bucket of money that's specifically used for this. And it's used nationwide in all sorts of places, because this isn't just localized to us. You have all sorts of places where, hey, this neighborhood, to keep it safe, needs a levy, or it needs a this, or it needs a that, and then they can. This would let the city tap into that money to buy these homes in that particular use. But this only gets governed by if it's public acquisition.
And that's going to really impact our income as a city, because taking all those off the ad valorem tax roll, and all of a sudden you got 10 houses gone that were at $300,000 a piece, and that's $3 million worth of annual taxes that we're just saying bye-bye to. And
Well,
That means you need a housing strategy.
well,
Someplace else.
so you're absolutely right. But the only reason you would use this, the only reason you would tap into this money and you would use this is, for example, is Miller's Bayou, is use that money to get something so that you can then have a place to divert stormwater and to divert stuff and create a holding pen for stormwater. And then because now you're not flooding that central island out between Miller Bayou and Bay Boulevard. Now that those houses aren't flooding even in an afternoon rainstorm because you've got a place for stormwater to go, the housing values on all of those remaining houses goes up.
Correct.
So the idea is that you wouldn't buy 10 in an area. You'd buy one in an area that allows you to create a higher value for all of the surrounding properties because you need it for that
Which
very
is the problem
specific
with that
purpose.
property on Miller Bayou as well, because we've not done such. And as such, many of those properties on Bay Boulevard and even on the north side of Miller Bayou Drive, they still flood in their backyards. They had water in their backyards for a month after the storm. So, and that property was purchased with the sole intent to make a retention area there. And we didn't do it. Matter of fact, we brought fill in and made it higher.
That's a development problem. But that's a perfect spot to dig a pit, make a regular retention pond, put a weir in, cut across the road, and get through out to Miller Bayou,
100%.
To the bayou, so that you can drain that center section of the neighborhood. Limestone's a perfect example. There might be a single spot there somewhere that makes sense that you need to be able to put a drainage pond in to hold rainwater and then be able to pump it out to an area. But the land is so valuable. Anything that touches a canal is so expensive that the city really can't access it to cut a ditch through the middle of it unless you can tap into fees, into this kind of property.
And the reality is, if you accept what potential is for rising sea levels, we know right now what that inundation 100 years from now, just the normal daily, here's the rise of the sea level, we know what that's going to be, right? And so those projections tell us the areas that are going to be the most vulnerable. And it's a lot of our land. And so we have to make a decision today. Are we going to try to save all this land, or are we just going to retreat? Because, it's going to happen. If you make that decision to save the land, there are things you can do, right? You can start looking at handling those things, but it is going to mean that there's going to be houses that are here today that 100 years from now are not going to be there, because we need those to save all of the houses. And I will guarantee you, between now and 100 years from now, there's going to be houses that we can identify, those areas, saying that would be a perfect spot for this someday down the road when we need it. If we don't have a plan today to deal with it, we're never going to have that opportunity because, houses change hands, and when they come up for sale, that's our opportunity to try to grab them and be able to take, impact this. But if you don't do it, then ultimately you're going to be losing all of your houses. And so you do have to have a strategy, and that's, I think, what the movement is today within the city, is to try to develop that strategy so we can be prepared. Again, I don't think we want to lose Sand Pebble, Harbor Point, right? Don't think we want to lose that. But the reality is, put the water up 5 or 6 more feet, which in 100 years is what they're saying that could be out there. You can't get there anymore when it's up that way. And so we're going to have to do something to protect that. It's either going to build this big bridge out there, or you're going to do something to make sure that the water can go somewhere. And that's, I think, what we're trying to do now is identify what those opportunities are today, so we don't have to force someone out of their house, right? That's the worst thing that we can do, is say, listen, we need your house for this public purpose, so goodbye. Here's a couple $100,000. Again, over time, those opportunities are going to arise where we can, do it in a way that's going to be more friendly to the residents and the owners of those properties.
Are we planning any lift station programs to try to move some of this water instead of just?
Well, I think that goes back to the stormwater management plan. I'll tell you, planning, there's a lot of engineering that goes into effectively moving water in an area. If you don't do that work, if you just try to, right there, you're going to be a lot worse off than doing nothing at all. And so I think that's where, we have to get the plan first. We have to understand where these areas are. Then how do we address those? I mean, if you really look at everything west of 19, why do you want to store any water west of 19? Right. Because we have this big storage place out to the west. So, west of 19 is how the hell do you get the water out of here? Right. The quickest as possible. And the storage part really is, okay, when the water's coming in, where do we store the water? And really looking to store water above ground from the sea makes no sense whatsoever. And most places, are either going to, provide a levee, try to keep the water back. Now, our problem is we have all these canals, so the levee's not going to be too effective. The second piece is, okay, what type of underground storage can we build? And when you look at Bay Boulevard example, you put in a 36-inch pipe along Bay Boulevard there, you don't have any flooding. So there are a lot of techniques, but again, understanding, should that be 36 inches or should it be 48 inches? That's what engineers tell us. That's why you have to have those plans and the engineering done to do it. So when we do it right, and we don't regret spending the money that we spent.
Should we go to a breaking point? We have people that have to leave.
Yeah, if you need to, I don't know how much more you
We're,
have.
we're almost to the end.
Okay.
So
Randy's done with his.
Okay.
oh, you're done.
So we'll just end with Randy, and then we'll come back the next time and work on
That's
the next person.
We'll come back with some new language wherever you
Absolutely.
have comments. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for getting the conversation started. It was really
Was this
appreciated.
a meeting or a workshop?
It's a workshop.
Discussion.
So yeah, discussion. So which is what we're doing.
We'll need to advertise. It'll be a public hearing.
Yeah. I think we're probably at least one more workshop away, right?
I don't know. I don't know how much more
What do
you
you guys
guys
think?
have to
Another
discuss.
workshop?
Or
Do you need another workshop, or do we need to have a workshop to discuss the changes we're going to make?
Well, can't you? Oh, you can't do
No,
that.
no, you could no. I'm saying no to
I'm asking
everything.
from
No,
that.
no.
Okay.
You could you could have it as a public hearing, and if you have recommended changes, that's okay. You can still do that. But if you think you have a lot more to discuss, and I don't know if everyone's
I
kind of
don't.
hit their topics.
Well,
Okay.
I have 2 pages, little short pages of things we're going to talk about. Maybe, I don't know.
So
I
that we can
said
go to
yes,
an actual
like
meeting
8
then.
I think your next one can
So
be
let's go take it to a meeting.
Revising.
As long as we address those issues and bring that to the forefront of the
And
meeting.
you can still tweak them. You can recommend approval with
So
some
we Meeting
or public hearing?
So we will
Does it need to be at
submit
6 o'clock, or can we still do it 1 o'clock?
No, that one doesn't have the same requirements as a rezoning.
Okay,
So
so
you
let
can-
them do
you
it. It's
can
a
do
meeting
it.
at 1 o'clock then. Perfect. Okay. All right.
whenever Tammy's available.
Perfect.
And what?
I said whenever Tammy's available.
In that case, then, do I need a motion to adjourn? Okay, perfect.
When did you guys decide on a date?
The next meeting.
No.
So it'd be,
No, that's, you're
I'm
gonna
gonna
have
do it the next, so it's,
Your
what's that, the 11th, March 11th?
Let me see.
Well, it wouldn't be the 11th. It's today's the 11th, right? Or is it the same?
I think.
it is actually the same.
Oh,
Because
that's
of
right.
February having
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
March
Sorry
11th
for,
works for me.
sorry
This-
for
this is
doubting
like-
you.
This is like the only month that I know the dates, is March. Except on leap years.
So if I'm looking
I
at this
am
right,
available.
March 11th sounds
Perfect.
weekend.
you want a motion?
Yeah, I need a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, perfect. Thanks, guys.
Good job, everybody. Very nice.
Because we were all rolling, like, we're not stopping, and I knew Mike had to go, and I have 4 o'clock too.
Oh, yeah, gotta go.
Now you're so ready. You got to go somewhere.
I
go
gotta
somewhere.
pick up my,
Yeah.
pick up
Go.
one and catch another one and head to music lessons.
It's that time of the
Start-
If anybody wants a snack.
I don't have that problem anymore.
Oh, your kids.
Mine drive themselves.
Mine should, but doesn't.
How old is Haley?
22.
Yeah, well then, you might have.
No. She's home right now. She got home yesterday. She's home right now, so she go to grad, so she can sign up for grad school.